The world spun into a blur, a chaotic montage of fragmented images. I remember Dave lying on the floor, the snow melting around him by the roaring fire. Then flashes of a helicopter, the worrying blades a deafening pulse against my throbbing head. I saw people in rescue uniforms, their faces a mix of concern and urgency. The harsh, sterile lights of a hospital entrance blinded me, followed by a dizzying race through endless corridors. Then, nothing. I woke in a room I didn't know. The air was thick with the scent of antiseptic, and a steady rhythmic beep echoed from somewhere to my left. It took me a few minutes to realize I was in a hospital. My body felt heavy, my thoughts sluggish, and coated in a thick fog. I was still groggy, but I scanned the room expecting to see Terry and maybe Kawokia, depending on hospital rules. But I was alone. My fingers fumbled about for a few seconds, clumsy and weak, until they found the call button. I pressed it, the small click sounding like a gunshot in the silent room. A few seconds later, a woman in a nurse's outfit entered. "Mr. Thompson," she said, smiling sweetly at me, "you have been out for 5 days." Her voice was gentle, but the words hit me like a physical blow. 5 days? "I will let the doctor explain," she said, as a man in his late 20s entered wearing a doctor's outfit with a stethoscope draped around his neck. "Afternoon, Mr. Thompson," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. "To get you up to date, you have been feverish and in and out of consciousness for the last 4.5 days. You had a blood infection from your head wound. We have been giving you antibiotics intravenously to clear it." He paused, letting the information sink in. "Now that you're awake, I shall contact the Ranger Service, as they need you to tell them what you have been through." I blinked, confused. Didn't Terry do that? The doctor looked at me funny, a slight frown creasing his brow. "I heard nothing about any Terry person. But the Rangers will deal with that." The doctor turned and left the room. I lay back against the pillows, the exhaustion washing over me like a tidal wave, and fell asleep again. I woke to find a man sitting in the corner of the room. He wore the same uniform as Terry, a familiar khaki and green. So I straight away realized he must be the Ranger, here to take my statement. "Hi, Mr. Thompson. My name is Steve Brooks. I work for the Ranger Service, and I'm here to collect a statement on what you have been through." I greeted him and started to recount the incident, from the moment I got lost, the fall, the injury, right up until I passed out in the forest. While I explained, I saw his face change halfway through, a subtle shift in his expression. When I spoke of Terry and Kawokia, he listened intently, not interrupting once. At the end, Steve thanked me and said he needed to check on a few things and would return the next morning. I thanked him, and he left for the rest of the evening. I relaxed in between bandage changing and medication, the quiet hum of the hospital a strange comfort after the wilderness. The next morning, Steve returned as promised. His face had a strange smile on it, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Morning, Mr. Thompson," he said, his tone more serious than the day before. "I need you to look at a few things for me, if you would." I agreed, and he pulled out a worn photograph. He asked if the person and the dog in the picture were the Terry and Kawokia I had stated helped me. "It was them," I replied, the man's kind eyes, the dog's loyal stance. "It was," I confirmed, and his face went grim. He then pulled out a creased news article and asked me to read it. I started reading. It was an article about a ranger and his dog who had disappeared without a trace nearly 4 years earlier. At the bottom of the article was a picture of Terry and Kawokia. I looked at Steve with utter confusion, my mind reeling. Neither of us knew what to say. At that moment, the door to my room burst open, and a well-built man in his late 30s or early 40s rushed in. "Steve, is this him?" the man proclaimed in an excited, high-pitched voice, his eyes wide and fixed on me. Steve turned, standing and blocking the man, his body a protective shield. "Carl, calm down. I told you I would come and see you after I had spoken to Mr. Thompson," he said, gently but firmly pushing Carl back outside the room. Steve re-entered a moment later and apologized for his colleague's outburst. He explained that Carl is Terry's younger brother, and that my sighting was the first sign of him since the disappearance. He told me how Carl had been out multiple times, tracking all over the forest, trying to find something, anything, even if it was just their bodies. He just needed to know, but he had had no luck until now. I thanked Steve for the information, and feeling a strange sense of duty, agreed to speak to Carl the next morning. The conversation the next day with Carl was intense, to say the least. He bombarded me with hundreds of questions, or at least it seemed that many. His desperate energy was a tangible force in the small hospital room. I agreed to retrace the trip in reverse, to try and find clues to his brother and Kawakea's whereabouts. It took me about a month to get to a point where I was well enough to go. Carl helped me plan our route, and together we tracked our way back to the cave where it all began. It took us 2 days of hard trekking, but finally, we were stood at the entrance of the very familiar cave. It was a place that was seared into my memory, a place that if I were to live till I was 100, I would never forget. We entered with hesitation and caution. We did not know what to expect, but what would greet us was something that put both Carl and myself into shock. In the back corner of the cave, there was a skeleton of a man, and there by his side, one of a dog. At the head of the man's skeleton was a weathered backpack with a journal lying on top. Inside its pages was a picture of Terry and Kawakea, along with a recount of his last 4 days after he had fallen and broken both his legs. It also stated how Kawakea wouldn't leave him, not even to feed. Carl walked outside without saying anything and got his satellite phone out, calling for a helicopter to our coordinates. It arrived within an hour. During this time, Carl had said nothing to me. We were both in shock, I believe. On the helicopter trip back, the roar of the blades filling the silence between us, Carl turned to me and thanked me for my help. I said I hadn't done anything to deserve it, and was sorry about what we found and how I couldn't explain it. He replied with a small, sad smile, saying, "You've done more than you know. At least now I can bury my brother and Kawakea the way they should be. And that's because of you." I went to the funeral a week later. Both of them were buried next to each other, the same way they had been found, on the family ground. I still wake some nights with sweats after dreaming I was back there in that cave. My psychiatrist believes I must have found and read the journal that first night in the cave, and that, along with the photo, it allowed my mind to conjure Terry and Kawakea as a coping mechanism during a stressful time. He thinks the information in the journal was what allowed me to make it back as far as I did before collapsing. I'm not sure. To me, the whole thing was real, but I guess I'll never know for sure. All I can do is carry on. No matter what, I will be thankful for Terry and Kawakea's help, even if it was just the information out of the journal or their spirits coming to help me, so I didn't suffer the same fate as them in the same place.